Hello, we're here on the freeCodeCamp.org YouTube channel, and we're about to introduce a new JavaScript curriculum from freeCodeCamp.org. And I'm here with Jessica Wilkins, who's going to be talking about it. So, Jessica, could you start off by talking a little bit about yourself and your role at freeCodeCamp, and specifically your role with this JavaScript curriculum?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Jessica Wilkins. I'm a software developer based out of Los Angeles, California. I work full time now with FreeCodeCamp on the curriculum development team. And so we just launched the all new JavaScript project based curriculum there. So you're going to learn JavaScript by building projects. And so we have some really cool projects that we've put together for you guys to learn. And I've been with FreeCodeCamp full time since August of this year, but I've been working with FreeCodeCamp as a part time and contributor for a few years now. I think since like 2020. Wow, it's been a while. But yeah, that's a little like introduction about me.
Okay, yeah, great. So maybe you can talk even more about this JavaScript curriculum and what is it like for learners going through it?
Yeah. So for those of you who are familiar with the older version of the curriculum, you learned JavaScript by building, you going through interactive challenges. But this curriculum is different because you're going to be learning JavaScript by building actual projects. So the first project you're going to build is a role-playing game, and you're going to learn how to work with the DOM, and you're going to learn the basics of JavaScript, like working with arrays and objects and variables and if-else statements and functions and all of that. And so you start from scratch, building out a little bit of HTML, a little bit of CSS, and then you dive straight into the JavaScript. So you learn how all three of those languages work together to build interactive web applications. And so you start with that, and then you keep building off of your knowledge. You start learning about event listers. You start learning about object-oriented programming by building a platformer game and a dice game, learning about algorithmic thinking. There's so many cool things. There's a lot of games actually in this one that I realized like we have a lot of games, but games are actually really cool because there's so much logic behind games, and there's so many different things you have to think about in terms of different scenarios that the user has to go through. And so I think the learner is going to have a great time just solidifying their JavaScript knowledge by going through this interactive project-based curriculum.
Oh, yeah, it sounds very comprehensive. Like, who's the target audience for this course? Who do you think will benefit the most from it?
Yeah, so this course is intended for the absolute beginner. So you don't have to have any prior programming knowledge or any prior knowledge of JavaScript. So this assumes that you have zero knowledge you coming from the responsive web design certification, or maybe you have some brief exposure to HTML and CSS, but we're really just going to dive straight into JavaScript. And so you can see how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript work together. So only the first two projects will we cover a little bit of HTML and CSS, have you write out some of the steps, and then the rest of the project will just supply the HTML and CSS for you, so you can just jump straight into the JavaScript. But it just assumes that you're an absolute beginner. You don't have to have any prior programming knowledge or exposure to JavaScript to enjoy this course.
Okay, great. And I assume that this was a team effort to develop this curriculum.
Yeah, it definitely took a lot of us coming together. It's been actually maybe I think at this point almost 2 years into the making, from like just conceptualizing and building out the practice projects and kind of going back and forth on what we wanted to teach and which concepts and where each project was going to go, and building out all the prototypes. So we started off with that, a lot of discussions and building out prototypes, sharing ideas, reviewing each other's work. And then once we kind of solidified on those prototypes, then we started breaking them down into steps and tests. And then just going through the flow and making sure all the projects work together as a nice, like, cohesive curriculum there.
Hmm. Well, it sounds pretty great. So, what are viewers going to see in this video here?
Yeah, so the purpose of this video is just give a sneak peek of each of the projects. And so we'll start with the very first one, which is a role-playing game, and it will just be me just kind of walking through the final preview project of what people are going to build. And then we jump into the next project, which is a calorie counter, and do the same thing where we show the final preview of what people are going to build. And then we keep going from there. So the next one after that is an interactive music player project. And then we have more projects along the way. And then I'll also show them what they'll be building for the other certification projects. We still have 5 certification projects, just like the other certifications on FreeCodeCamp, but these are also going to have all new UIs, and so learners will get a lot of experience just building out HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so they can see how all 3 of that comes together there. And so that's the whole thing, is just to kind of give a sneak peek on like what they're going to be building. So we're not really going to be like coding along per se, but we'll just dive straight into the curriculum just to show them like the final previews of each of the project, just to get people really excited about what they're going to be able to build.
Well, that sounds great. So let's get on to the rest of the video here.
All right, so here we are at the very first project of the all-new JavaScript curriculum. So make sure you head over to freeCodeCamp.org/learn to see this brand new curriculum. So the very first project we have is a role-playing game. This is where you're going to learn the basics of JavaScript and also just the basics of programming in general. So learning how to work with functions and variables and if-else statements and loops and so much more. So let's go ahead and start the project. And this is what you're actually going to build. It's a role-playing game called Dragon Repeller. And so you can make certain decisions in the game, like going to the store. You can buy some health right here, and you can see that it updates up here using JavaScript. You can buy a weapon. It will show you which weapons you have. And then if you don't have enough money to buy something, then it will also show you that. And so this is what is known as a condition, and you're going to learn how to do that in JavaScript in this project. And then you can go back, you can fight a dragon, and so you can learn how to dynamically hide and show HTML elements using JavaScript. And let's see, we're attacking it, and unfortunately we didn't win, we died, so we could replay the game, reset it, and start all over again. And so you can play for multiple rounds right there. There's also a hidden secret Easter egg inside here, and an additional game that you can play. And so that's just a little preview of what you're going to be building for this very first project. And so for step 1, you're actually going to start off with a complete blank slate. As you can see here, you're going to start with the HTML boilerplate code and build out the basic HTML structure. Then you're going to move into the CSS for styling. Then you're actually going to jump into the JavaScript, which is around step 15 or so. And so this helps you understand how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript work together to build interactive web applications right there. So that's why we started off with just a complete blank slate, so you can connect all 3 of those languages together right there. And so the great thing about this project is that there's tons of steps right here. So this is the largest project that we have. However, that's actually a really good thing, because when you're learning programming, you want to have tons of repetition in order for the concepts to actually stick and to feel comfortable executing on these concepts right here. So here's a sneak peek of the code that you are going to be writing in this first project right here. And so you're going to have tons of practice learning how to work with objects and arrays and loops and variables and functions and so much more. And you're going to have practice just constantly writing that out. And that will enable you to actually feel more comfortable executing on these concepts. Because one of the common things when people are first learning is they learn a concept, they practice it once, and then they forget about it. With this project and all of the projects in the curriculum, you're constantly practicing, you're constantly repeating yourself just so it really sticks with you in that muscle memory right there. So that wraps it up for this very first project on learning basic JavaScript by building a role-playing game. So for the second project in the JavaScript curriculum is going to be the Calorie Counter project. And in this project, you're going to learn the basics of form validation. And so oftentimes when you're building out interactive web applications, you are going to be dealing with some sort of user input. And so this is a gentle introduction on how do you process that user input right there. And so let's take a look at the project. And so this is what you're actually going to be building. So you can set a daily calorie budget. So let's just say, 2,000 maybe. And then here you have different fields for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and exercise. And so what you could do is you could select which inputs you want. So let's say, I want to start with lunch and add an entry. Then that will show me the inputs. And then I can add, let's say, a sandwich. I have no clue. I'll just put 200. And you can add as many entries as you like. So let's say maybe a breakfast one. in eggs, I don't know how many calories. I'm totally making up these numbers, but you get the point there. So you can add as many entries as you would like right there. So we got chips, 120. And then once you're done, you can calculate the remaining calories and scroll down, and it will take that daily amount that you entered at the beginning and do some basic calculations there. And you can see either you have a surplus or a deficit right there, and then how many calories you've consumed and budgeted and burned and all that fun stuff right there. So you're going to learn how to do all of this stuff in this second project right here. And so similar to the first project, you are going to be writing a little bit of HTML and CSS. We give you most of the HTML and CSS, and then you're going to start by adding the form element, and then you're going to jump into the JavaScript right there and learn how to deal with user input. How can you tell if a user input is valid or not? What do you do in those situations? How do you communicate that to the user, etc.? So this is a really cool project there that will build off of your knowledge from the previous project and introduce some new concepts that you can use in your own interactive JavaScript applications. So that wraps it up for this intro to the second project, where you learn form validation by building a calorie counter. So for the very third project in the curriculum, you're going to build your very own music player. So I think this is a really cool project because there's so many new JavaScript concepts that you're going to be learning and building from. And so let's take a look at this. And so you're going to build your very own music player, and the playlist features the songs by none other than Quincy Larson. So these are all of his original songs that he wrote and performed himself, and has lent his songs over to this project. So it's really cool because you can play from the very beginning, and it will highlight the correct song that's actually playing. You'll be able to pause the song, and you can notice here that we have these yellow indicators to show if we're playing or pausing, or if we are starting over, if we're going to the next one right there. You can also see that it correctly updates the song title right here, as well as the visual indicator updates every single time we move to a new song. So you're going to learn how to do that using JavaScript. You can also shuffle through the different songs right here. And so if we press this a few times, you can see that the songs are correctly updating and shuffling around. You can also remove songs from a playlist with this little red icon, this delete icon. So if we delete all of the songs right here, then you have an option to actually reset the playlist. And when you do that, then it just populates the playlist with the original songs. And so it's a really cool project, and you're going to learn a ton by building this out. So from this point forward, you're no longer going to need to write out the HTML and CSS for these projects. All that's just going to be provided for you, because we're going to dive straight into the JavaScript. And so I hope you really enjoy this project. You learn a lot from it, and then maybe you can build from there and add new features and kind of make it your own little music player. But that wraps it up for this introduction into the third project of the all-new JavaScript curriculum. So the next project, you are going to learn how to work with the date object in JavaScript by building a date formatter. So dates notoriously could be a little bit tricky, especially in production level apps and you're dealing with time zones. And so it's still really important, though, to learn the basics of working with JavaScript's date object. And this particular object has different properties on it, like getting the month and the year and hours and seconds. And so we're going to learn how to format different dates using JavaScript. So this is a preview of what we're going to be building here. And so by default, it's going to show you the date format, the current date here, which is the 17th. It's December 17th, 2023 right there. So day, month, year. But then if we want to change the format to year, month, day, then it will just update that particular format. Or we can change it and show the month, day, year, hours, and minutes, and it will show you that format as well. So you can kind of just toggle between these different options right here and you're going to learn how to do that. So this is a shorter project compared to the first 3 that we looked at, but it's still a really good introduction in how to work with the date object. And as I mentioned earlier, all the HTML and CSS will be provided for you in this project, so you can just jump straight into the JavaScript. And that wraps it up for this intro for the date formatter project. So the next project we're going to take a look at is the Palindrome checker. And this is actually the first certification project that we have seen so far in the curriculum. So the first 4 projects were actually the practice projects, and that's where you were led step by step and learned new JavaScript concepts. But the certification projects right there, you're building from scratch, and you're actually going to be given a set of user stories that your project needs to include and be able to pass all of these tests right here in order to collect the certification. So there's a total of 5 certification projects, and this is the first one we're taking a look at. Now, in terms of building this out, before we take a look at what we're building, where should you build it, you can either build it out inside the FreeCodeCamp editor, or you can build it out locally if you have experience working with something like Visual Studio Code or Sublime or Brackets or Atom or WebStorm or whatever. So if you want to build it out locally, that's totally cool, as long as you just copy and paste your solution in here, and then you're able to pass all of the tests right here. So let's take a look at what we're actually going to be building. So this is the demo project right here. And so a palindrome is a word that could be spelled the same front and back. So an example of this would be the word I, E-Y-E, because it's spelled the same forwards and backwards. So the main functionality that you need to implement in the certification project is if a user doesn't supply any input and just clicks on this check button, then an alert should show up and say, hey, you need to supply something. The other thing is we need to be able to determine if a word is a palindrome. And so they should be able to enter into a word and then check if it is in fact a palindrome and supply that correct result. And if it's not a palindrome, like my name, well, then it should also correctly get that it's not a palindrome. And so that's the main functionality for this certification project. So a quick note about the styles here. A lot of people think that they have to copy the styles exactly for all these certification projects, and that's actually not true. It's encouraged that you use your own styling. So this is just the styling that the FreeCodeCamp team went with, but you can style this however you want to. The main thing is the JavaScript functionality has to be there. And so don't worry about styling if you're just like, I don't want to use these styles. That's totally fine. This is just the demo project. You can use whatever styles you want to. As long as you have the core functionality that we just talked about right there, that is what is required to pass the certification right there. So that wraps it up for this project, and we'll take a look at the next one. For this next project, we are going to build out a set of football team cards. So this project is going to cover concepts like working with object destructuring, object.freeze, the map method, and so much more. So let's take a look at what the final project is going to look like. So here we have some team stats, and we have Team Argentina, football or American soccer, the year 1986, and then the head coach right here. And then we have a list of the players for that respective team. And so what you're going to learn how to do, the functionality where that comes in is actually this drop-down menu. So you can filter through the players based off of their nicknames or the position that they play on the team. So if we just want to see players that actually have nicknames there, then it will filter through that list and filter out the ones that don't have nicknames and only show the ones that do. You could also filter by position forward, and you can filter by position midfielder and defender, and then also goalkeeper right there. And so you can just kind of keep filtering through all of these and just dynamically update the list depending on what you want to see. And then you can go back to looking at all of the different players. And so that's the JavaScript functionality that we are going to be focused on right there. So this is a great project to kind of practice more working with objects and then how to get information from those objects, and then also to filter through the objects and dynamically display the different player cards on the screen. So that wraps it up for this intro, and then we're going to jump into the very next project. So for this next project, you are going to learn how to work with local storage by building a to-do application. So local storage is a feature provided by the browser where you can save data in the browser and you can leave your web application and come back to it, and that data will still be saved in there. So you're going to learn how to work with the get and set methods for local storage. And you're going to learn that by building a to-do application. And to-do applications are great when you're first learning because you're going to learn the basics of CRUD operations. And CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete there. So let's take a look at the project. So it starts off as just a blank slate. We haven't added anything yet. I can add a new task and just say recording a video. I can add a date if I want to. So here's today's date. And then I can say something like recording a video today. Cool. Add task. And then it will just save that inside the list of tasks. So I have the option to edit. And if I want to say recording an awesome video right now to show my excitement, I can update that task. And then it will actually update that like so. You can also delete tasks. You can add multiple tasks. And we've also have this feature where, let's say I'm adding a task and then I change my mind. And if I click the X out where there's data here, it will ask me, hey, are you sure? Do you want to remove this because you're going to lose your changes? And then you can prompt it and say, yes, I'm totally sure. And so this is great. And one of the things here is that if I try to refresh the page, then it will show the local storage that I was talking about, where even though I did a manual refresh right there, it still had my original data. And so that is the local storage portion that I was talking about earlier, where you can actually manually leave or refresh the page and come back and it's saved in your local storage. So you're going to see what all of that is about. So that's an introduction into this project on learning local storage by building a to-do application. For this next project, you are going to learn all about recursion by building out a decimal to binary converter. So recursion is often one of those topics that can be really confusing at first. And it took me a really long time to kind of wrap my head around it because oftentimes people will refer to it as a function that calls itself. And until you really understand what's happening with the call stack, sometimes it's just really confusing. But this is a popular technique used to break down a larger complex problem and break it down into smaller sub-problems so you can solve it. And so we're going to teach recursion by building out a decimal to binary converter. And so the decimal number system, base 10, 0 through 9 numbers, is probably the one that you're most familiar with. But then we also have the binary number system, which is a base 2 system made up of zeros and ones. And this project goes into a little bit more detail on the different number systems as you're building out this project. So let's take a look at the project itself. So here, if you don't provide anything, then an alert shows up and says, hey, I'm expecting a decimal number. So if I actually provided a number like 10 and convert it, it's going to convert it into the binary representation of the decimal 10. So in order to see the animation here, we actually have to test this out with the number 5. And what we've done here is to try to illustrate what's happening within the call stack when you're working with recursion. So I'm going to click on the convert number. And it's meant to represent what's happening on your call stack here. And we're going to go into more detail when you actually go through this project, what all of this text is actually meaning here. But we wanted to create an animation to kind of illustrate what's happening when you're writing recursive functions and illustrate that on the call stack. So that's the main purpose behind this particular project, is to learn the basics of recursion and build out a small little animation to just better illustrate how recursion works with the call stack. And that wraps it up for this introduction, and we'll jump into the next project. So for this next project, you are going to build out a Roman numeral converter. And this is actually the second certification project in the curriculum. And so similar to the first one here, you're going to be given a set of directions, a complete blank slate. So for this Roman numeral, it gives you a quick chart here between popular Roman numerals and the Arabic numerals on the side right here. And your job is that a user should be able to input an Arabic numeral, and then you convert it to a Roman numeral. So that's the whole purpose of this certification project. And there's a whole list of user stories that we have right here, and you have to make sure to implement all 11 and run the tests and make sure that every single test is passing. And then it's encouraged to give your own style. So let's take a look at the demo project right here. And so if you try to convert nothing, it will say, please enter an actual number. We're using the number input here, which has some basic validation as well. So if I input the number 12 and convert it, then it will convert it to a Roman numeral. And if I do something like the number 4, then it will keep converting it. And because we're using the number input, then I can't input just regular letters like my name or something like that, because obviously that's not going to translate over to a Roman numeral. And so that's the whole purpose of this project right here. And so you have to design an algorithm that takes in a decimal number there and then converts it over to a Roman numeral and outputs it. And again, just like the other project, in terms of the styling, you don't need to copy this styling. You can use your own styles. It's actually encouraged for you to use your own styles. The main thing is that you have to have the functionality. So we should be able to input a number and it outputs the correct Roman numeral. So you have to design the correct algorithm for that. And that wraps it up for this introduction into the Roman numeral converter. For this next project, we are going to learn the basics of algorithmic thinking and different sorting algorithms by building out a number sorter. So in computer science, there's a few popular sorting algorithms that you can use to sort a list of numbers. And so some of these would include bubble sort or insertion sort, selection sort, quick sort, and so many more. So it's really important to start learning basic data structures and algorithms to help you build your programs, as well as being prepared for technical interviews when you get ready to apply for a job. And so this first project right here on algorithmic thinking is going to introduce you to some popular sorting algorithms that you will run into in your typical intro to computer science class. So let's take a look at the actual project right here. And so we have a few different inputs of random numbers here, and we can change the different numbers and sort them in whatever order we want to. And when we click on the sort method, then it will just sort it from smallest to largest. And we can keep just randomly sorting everything, and then it will just update right here. But the main part for this project is that you're going to focus on 3 different popular sorting algorithms. So the first one is the bubble sort algorithm, and then you're also going to learn about selection sort and insertion sort. So you're going to build out all of these algorithms by hand to learn how each one works and compare each of them in sorting a list of numbers from smallest to largest. So that wraps it up for this introduction, and I'll catch you in the next video. For this next project, you are going to learn how to work with more intermediate and advanced JavaScript methods by building out a statistics calculator. So some of these important methods that you're going to be working with in this project are going to be the map and filter and reduce method in JavaScript. So you're going to get tons of practice working with these different higher order functions. And so in this project, you're going to build out a statistics calculator, and you're going to be working with different calculations to calculate the mode and the median and the variance and so much more. And the project will go into depth on how to do all of that. So let's take a look at the actual project. So this is the final project that you're going to build out. So it just gives a brief introduction into what all of these different calculations that you're going to be working with, like what a mean is and a median and a variance and all of that stuff. But basically what you're going to be doing is you can enter in a list of numbers and calculate that, and it will calculate the different, the mean, the median, the mode, range, variance, and standard deviation. And so you can list in whatever numbers that you want to right there. And so if I start to change it up, and let's see, let's do a different list of numbers, then it will update those different calculations right there. And so this is a really good project to kind of wrap your head around more advanced methods, especially the reduce method. I think for a lot of people, when they're first being introduced to the reduce method, sometimes they understand the basics of it, but working a little bit more with it and understanding how all that works in combination with like map and filter and other different methods, it's really important to kind of wrap your head around some of these higher order functions and how you can use them within your program. And so that's the whole purpose of this statistics calculator. So that wraps it up for this introduction, and I will see you in the next video. For this next project, we are going to learn about functional programming by building a spreadsheet application. And so functional programming is an approach in software development where you organize your code by breaking it down into smaller functions. And this approach is meant to help you build out more complex applications. So it's just a different way of approaching than designing and organizing your code. And so we're going to build out a functioning spreadsheet application where you can do a variety of mathematical operations, and we're going to walk you through how to interact within the spreadsheet and how to actually execute these expressions right here. So let's go ahead and take a look. So this is actually what the project looks like. It's just a blank spreadsheet. So imagine Google spreadsheets and stuff like that. But I've actually inputted a few numbers here just to illustrate a few of the calculations that you could do. And so to make a calculation for any of these cells here, you could start prefixing it with the equals sign. And if we wanted to, let's say, add two numbers from a cell, let's say we wanted to add A3 and B4. So we could do A3 plus B4 and hit enter, and then it will do the correct calculation. I've also added a couple of functions right here so we can check if everything within a range between A2 and A5, if that is in fact all even. And so if we take a look, no, we do have number 15, which is odd. So it's going to return false right there. And so you could do these different calculations, and we're going to walk through every single calculation through the step-by-step project when you're building it out there, and you're going to learn how to make this spreadsheet interactive. And so when it first starts, then it's just going to give you the basic blank spreadsheet and the HTML and CSS, and then it's your job to add all of that interactive portion using JavaScript. All right, so that wraps it up for this intro, and I'll see you in the next project. For this next project, we are going to learn all about regular expressions by building out a spam filter. So regular expressions, or regex for short, are patterns that you can use to match and search for text. So sometimes when you're learning regular expressions, it can be a little bit complicated because there are these weird, funny symbols. But with enough practice, then you start to get a little bit more comfortable with regular expressions. And the good news is there's tons of online tools like Regex 101 to help you build out your regular expressions. So let's take a look at the project that you're going to build. And so we're going to build out a spam filter. So there's a list of phrases that you are going to need to check for using regular expressions. So some of the phrases are going to be like free money, because no one offers up free money. And it should spit out, hey, this is a spam message. But if you say something like, hi there, well, that's not necessarily a spam message. And so it should be able to check the text and say, this looks like spam or it doesn't. Now, this is a very basic spam filter, but it's just meant to kind of introduce you into regular expressions and how to start to work with them for matching and searching text right there. And so there's going to be a list of phrases that you're going to need to check. And that wraps it up for this introduction into regular expressions by building a spam filter. For this next project, you are going to learn how to build out a telephone validator. And this is actually the third certification project in the curriculum. And so this is a project where you're going to check for a valid United States phone number, and it gives a few examples of valid entries. But basically, a United States phone number has the country code of 1, followed by a 3-digit area code, followed by a 7-digit phone number. So some valid Phone numbers can have dashes. Some will have parentheses like this. Some will have a mixture of parentheses and dashes. Some could just be numbers without the country code. So all of these are examples of valid numbers. And your job is to create a telephone validator where a user inputs a number and then the output should be this is a valid US number or not. So let's take a look at the demo project. And again, you don't need to build out this actual style. This is just for the demo. You can use whatever styles that you want to for this certification project. But if you were to not input anything, then you should have the functionality where it alerts the user to say, hey, you need to provide something so we can check it. And inside this input here, you can have, so this is a valid United States number. You can check it, and it should return valid US number followed by the input that the user provided. But if I provide something like, my name, obviously that is not a valid United States number. Or if I just put in just random numbers like this is not a valid United States number. So that is the basics of this project right here, is that you should be able to check whatever the user input and output, whether it's a valid US number or clearly not a valid number. And you can also clear the input as well and add new ones. So that's the basic functionality that you have to build out for this certification project. And that wraps it up for this introduction, and I'll see you in the next project. For this next project, you are going to learn the basics of working with object-oriented programming by building a shopping cart project. So object-oriented programming is a way that you can design your code and build it out using a series of objects and classes. And so that differs from the functional programming style where you build out and design your projects around smaller functions. And so we're going to learn how to work with classes within the context of JavaScript. We're also going to learn to work with the this keyword, as well as so many other new concepts in this project. So let's go ahead and start the project. And this is what you're going to build. And so it's a little desserts page, and you can add certain things to the cart. So up here we have our little shopping cart, which is empty. So you can toggle that on and off. So you're going to learn how to do that with JavaScript. If you want to add something like, let's say, a French macaroon, then you can open the cart and you can see that it has been added with the correct price. And then it will show you the total number of items in your cart, as well as the subtotal, the tax, and the total. And so you're going to build out a class right here and have different methods for calculating the total and the taxes and all that fun stuff. And if you want to clear out your cart, then it will ask you, are you sure? And if so, then you can clear it out. You can hide it again. But you can add so many different things to your cart, and it will update. So we have 4 chocolate macaroons and then strawberry ice cream. And if we do show cart, then you can see that it shows the quantity of 4 as well as the ice cream, and it does the correct calculations right here. And so that's the basics of this project, and it's in your first introduction into working with classes in the context of JavaScript right there, and the this keyword and spread operator, and so much more. So that wraps it up for this introduction, and I'll see you in the next project. For this next project, you're going to continue working and learning object-oriented programming by building a platformer game. So this is a really cool game to just kind of solidify your knowledge of what you learned in the previous project with the shopping cart on how to work with object-oriented programming and classes inside JavaScript. So here I've pulled up the final step, and if I show the preview here, I just want to make sure that we have plenty of room to work with. And so this is our platformer game, and you are going to build this out. So it has a little start screen right here. And when we click on the start screen, then we can use the keyboard controls, and we can move our player. We can jump up and down. So you're going to learn how to build out that functionality. Then you can jump on the different platformers. You're also going to learn how to build out this kind of moving, giving us illusion right here that we're moving forward and backwards and whatnot. You're going to learn how to build that out. And then we also have these like yellow checkpoints. And so when you hit a checkpoint, then a little message pops up and says, hey, cool, good for you. And so you can kind of go throughout this platform game, hitting the different checkpoints, using your keyboard controls on your computer. And then once you reach the final checkpoint, then the game is over. And so this is a great way for you to kind of think about different types of algorithms, like collision detection algorithms, and how to move throughout the game, how to interact with the different platforms and whatnot, and what to do when the player hits one of the checkpoints. All of that fun stuff you're going to learn in this game. And this is just going to help you solidify your approach to object-oriented programming in JavaScript. So that wraps it up for this introduction, and I'll see you in the next project. For this project, you're going to continue to learn more about algorithmic thinking and game design by building a dice game. And so some of the algorithms that you're going to be building are when the user rolls the dice, can they get a full house or a small or large straight or a three of a kind? And so you're going to be building out all of those different types of algorithms and displaying and awarding the correct points based on the type of dice that they rolled. So let's go ahead and take a look at the project preview. So this is the full project. So we have this show and hide rules button. And so you can actually show the rules and read through them, and you can see what kind of points you can get, and then you can hide them. So you're going to learn about that toggle functionality. And you actually learned about it in an earlier project with the shopping cart. So really you're just going to kind of review how to toggle on and off right there. But basically the way that this game works is that there's a total of 6 rounds, and so you can roll the dice up to 3 times per round. So I'm going to roll the dice here, and you get a random list of numbers between 1 and 6, representing the typical numbers you find on a dice. And then depending on the combination of numbers there, you can either get a 3 of a kind, 4 of a kind, full house, small straight, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, or large straight, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or you can get none of the above. So in this case, I didn't really get anything, so I could roll again. And in this case, I got a small straight, so I can actually select that and keep that score. Or I could try rolling again to see if I get a large straight, but I'm actually going to keep that score. And then you can move on to the next round. And so you can, depending on the random selection of numbers there, that you can get one of these scores, select which one you want to keep. And we'll move a little bit quicker here. So there's a total of 6 rounds. So I'm going to keep playing. And also another thing is if you press the button more than 3 times, because you're only allowed 3 rolls per round, then we have this little alert message that shows you. So I didn't really get anything that last round. But you can kind of just, and this is all random right here, just like, in an actual dice game. Oh, cool. I got a small straight. And so this is the last round. So if I keep that score, then you want to have that game logic to actually end the game after 6 rounds, show them the total score. When you click OK, it automatically resets the game and you start all over. So you're going to build out all of that dice game logic and build out your algorithmic thinking about what happens when the user does this. How do I build out these different algorithms for the different cases, like building a full house or a small straight or a 3 of a kind or a 4 of a kind, and how do I show the correct not prices but correct scores, and then total all of that up at the end. And so that's what you're really going to be building in this dice game project. So that wraps it up for this introduction, and I will see you in the next project. For this next project, you are going to build out a cash register. And this is actually the 4th certification project in the curriculum. So similar to the other ones, you're going to build everything from scratch, all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And we'll go into the functionality in just a second right here, but you'll be given a set of directions. Here's a little bit of a chart, as well as a demo link and a set of user stories that you have to pass in order to pass this project and get the certification right there. And so let's take a look at this demo project. And similar to all the other certification projects, all the demo projects, you do not need to replicate these styles. This is just the styles that the freeCodeCamp team came up with. You can come up with whatever styles you want to, but it's important that you have the exact functionality because that's what we're going to be testing you on. So this is the project that you are going to build out. And the basic functionality is as follows, is we have an item number right here. and then we have the list of change inside the cash register broken up by the amount of pennies, nickels, dimes, etc. And so I should be able to enter in a price, let's say, I don't know, $5, and click purchase, and it should give me back the correct amount of change, just like in the real world. I can also buy new items. So this one is for $200.59. And so if I do exact change, $200.59, and click purchase, then you should display a message saying no change due because I paid with exact cash, just like in the real world. And then if I try to be obnoxious and give a really large amount based on $10,000 here, then it should say insufficient funds because this is not a bank, right? Like the cash register, if you tried to do that at a grocery store, that obviously wouldn't work. If you tried to give somebody $10,000 paying for $82 worth of groceries, they probably won't have enough cash, I would imagine, right? And so you should have this insufficient funds message replicating what it would actually happen. So if you tried to give them too much money and they don't have enough change to give you, that is the correct behavior right there. So you can filter through just like the different items and test out those different scenarios. But that's the basic functionality that you need to build for this certification project. And so the key things are remembering what happens if the user gives you exact change, what happens if the user gives you too much money, do you have insufficient funds in your cash register, and then what happens if the user gives you just enough and you do have enough change to give them. So those are the different scenarios that you need to consider in this certification project. All right, so that wraps it up for this introduction, and I'll see you in the next project. For this next project, you are going to learn how to work with the Fetch API, and you're going to learn about asynchronous programming in this project by building a freeCodeCamp authors page. And so up until this point, you've mainly been working with synchronous programming, and this is going to be your first introduction in working with the Fetch API, where you're going to be able to fetch data and display the data on the page. You're going to deal with situation on if the data that you're fetching, if that request fails, how do you handle that situation? What is asynchronous programming? All of that stuff will be covered in this project. And it's really important to understand how to work with different APIs, how to get the results, how to display it on the page, especially as a front-end developer, because you will be tested on that in your technical interviews, and you will be doing that a lot on the actual job itself. So this is going to be your first introduction into working with external APIs. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actual project. So this is the project. And so we have a list of author cards, and these are actual freeCodeCamp authors found on the freeCodeCamp news page. So we have Quincy, we have myself, we have Ichikara, Jennifer, Calorie, et cetera, and you can actually load more authors right here. And so you're going to learn how to do that, because sometimes when you're working with these APIs, you don't want to fetch everything and load everything all at once, because that could be overwhelming. What if you had thousands of results? And so you're going to start to learn how to work with pagination, and that's what that load more button is that you can load the results and display a certain amount, whether it's 10 at a time or 25 at a time, instead of just displaying everything. And so you've probably been used to working with pagination on websites, especially like e-commerce websites and stuff like that, with different product pages. So this is an introduction into that. And so you'll be able to see the different authors and fetch more authors. And all of this data is being pulled from an API. And you're going to learn exactly what an API is. It's going to go into depth on how to work with that and how to work with the Fetch API and all of that fun stuff. But this is the basics of the project: is how do you work with an API? How do you get that information back? How do you actually display it on the page? And then what happens if you're not able to fetch the results from that API? How do you handle those edge cases and errors inside your code? So that's a basic introduction into working with asynchronous programming and the Fetch API by building out a freeCodeCamp authors page. So for this project, you're going to continue learning about asynchronous programming and working with async and await by building out a freeCodeCamp forum leaderboard project. And so this is basically just a continuation from the previous project, learning how to work with the Fetch API, learning how to get data in and display it on the page. But this is just going to expand on your knowledge from the previous project here. So let's take a look at what this project is all about. So this is basically just a reproduction of the latest topics that you'll find on the actual forum. So if I go to the actual forum site, this is the FreeCodeCamp forum where you can ask questions and have discussions with other learners. And so you're basically just building out this latest post page, and it pulls in the latest 30 posts right there in real time. So this maps exactly to what we're seeing on the actual site. And so what we're doing is we're pulling data from an API, and we're pulling in that data and then displaying it on the page. And so we're pulling out only certain parts of this data. We're pulling out the topics here, the user avatars of the ones who have been participating in the conversations. We can see the number of replies, the views. We can also see the last activities. So in this case, 33 minutes ago right there. So you're going to learn how to do all of that and build out all the functionality as well. So the styles will be provided for you, but you're going to learn how to pull all this information. And then also you're going to be able to click on a link right there, and it will, in theory, take you to the actual forum page. But this is what you're going to be building out, is you're going to learn how to pull information from an API, how to display it on the page, and arrange it in this order. And it's just a continuation of what you've been working with in the previous project with the FreeCodeCamp authors page. So that wraps it up for this introduction to the leaderboard project, and then we'll move on to the last and final project. So for the very last project in the curriculum, you are going to build out a Pokemon search application. And this is also the last certification project in the curriculum. So just like all the other certification projects, you're given a clean slate. So you're going to write all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript yourself. So you're going to be given a list of directions, a demo application, which we'll take a look at in a second, and then a list of user stories right here. And you have to make sure to pass every single one of these user stories and test it right here, run the test. And if everything passes, then you're able to submit your project. So let's take a look at the demo project. So just like all the other certification projects, you do not need to use the same styles as the FreeCodeCamp demo project. It's actually encouraged to just use your own styles, but you do have to have the same functionality. So what this application is doing is that you're able to search for Pokemon in a database of Pokemon, and where all this Pokemon is coming from is a Pokemon API. And so your work that you did with the FreeCodeCamp authors page and leaderboard projects is going to prepare you to do this certification project. So you're going to be able to enter in a Pokemon name or an ID number. So if I enter in Pikachu, for example, then it will search through that API and it will pull out the correct one, and it will list out the name, the ID, and certain attributes right here, and there are different stats. And then you can also search by ID number. So let's say 3, and you can search, and then it will dynamically update, as you can see right here, for Venusaur, and it will just show their correct attributes. And so as long as you provide a valid ID or Pokemon name, but you should also have an alert. So obviously I am not a Pokemon, so then you should see an alert that says Pokemon not found. And so what it's doing is it's just searching through that API, the list of Pokemon that it has, and if it can't find it, you should have an alert functionality to let the user know that that's not a valid entry right there. So we'll just go back to 3, back to Venusaur. All right, so that wraps it up for the entire JavaScript curriculum. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope that you are excited to jump into this curriculum. And again, this curriculum assumes that you're an absolute beginner. And so I know I kind of went through and showed you different intros, and there might have been points in this video where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to build that. How am I going to know how to do that? I promise you, we're going to start off really small and slow with the role-playing game, learning the basics, and then you just build from there and you learn more intermediate and advanced concepts, and then you will all culminate with these certification projects where you're going to build on your own. All right, thank you so much for watching, and happy coding.